Your body is an incredibly intelligent and magnificent system. In Western culture, we have this idea that the body is not intelligent. We place this massive amount of emphasis on just rational thought alone, to the point where we can deny intuition and feeling and like gut feelings, instincts, heart feelings. It's like this stuff isn't really seen as valid to a lot of people. It can be seen as kind of like woo-woo, wishy-washy, kind of new agey, a little bit up in the clouds, because we can't measure it, we can't look at it through the microscope. But deep down, we all sense this. We're all humans, and we all understand there's kind of something more going on here. We can all really just sense into that. Right? We all have these sort of impulses, these instincts within us, and not just like an instinct for like food, but I'm talking about like like a guiding force, right? An inner guidance system that's intelligent. And of course, not everyone is connected to it to the exact same degree, but if you're human enough, I'm sure you can relate to what I'm talking about. So you have to learn how to listen to your body, to your nervous system, right? Because your nervous system is intelligent. It's giving you signals, right? It's not stupid. Your body is so wise, and it's often far wiser than what you're thinking. Most of the time, it's wiser than what you're thinking. And we like to flip that on its head in Western culture, where like rational thought is up here and like this body feeling stuff is down here, when in actuality, it's not like overly hierarchical or anything. It's like all this stuff deserves its respected place within our sort of being, right? Like thought has its purpose, feeling has its purpose, gut feelings have its purpose, the heart feelings have its purpose, intuition has its purpose. And it's like we essentially want everything to have its place, to the point where not one thing is dominating any other thing. Because typically what's happening is like thought is dominating the rest, and we override our feelings, we override our intuition, we override our ability to really connect to what our nervous system is trying to tell us. Because we're just kind of too rigid in our thinking, too attached to it, too emotionally unintelligent as well. That's a massive part of it. So instead, we're trying to just like organize our experience so that every single part of us has a safe place to exist and it's welcomed fully, rather than like pushing parts away. Basically, without doing what I just said, there's going to be a lot of internal struggle, essentially, because there's all sorts of impulses and parts of you wanting to emerge, but there's no place for them to emerge. You're just kind of fighting against them. So you have to learn to actually attune to what is happening inside of you. And when you actually learn, which I'll be talking about that shortly, when you really begin to learn how to attune to yourself, you experience a more regulated nervous system. You basically slowly get out of fight, flight, freeze. You get out of survival mode, essentially, because most people are living in survival mode. Quite a lot of people are living in survival mode, not even because they actually have to be, but because there's just an overall ignorance of how to regulate the nervous system and get out of survival mode, because we're actually moving into some higher levels of consciousness here. Right? I don't say any of that in like a judgmental way whatsoever. I'm just trying to state an observation that a lot of us are in survival mode when we just simply don't have to be. Right? So when we actually learn to attune to our bodies, regulate the nervous system, we gain some management over our system. And the word management here isn't this like highly abstract sort of way of managing, like all these details and 1 + 1 = 2 and like, oh, this gotta go here. And like, it's not like that. It's like we're just kind of watching, and we're kind of noticing our energy levels. We're noticing what feels right for us. And it's just this extra ability to simply be with our experience and then not fight against it. And then just through this way of existing in relation to ourselves and our own inner experience, we just feel more regulated. We feel more connected to ourselves. We know what's kind of right and wrong for us. We know what fits us well and what doesn't. We know what's aligned with us and what isn't. Right? We know what's going to drain our energy and what isn't. Right? Whether it's people or foods or a workplace. It's like we're getting more in touch with ourselves and what is actually our true calling, in a sense. What's our authentic path. Right? Whereas when we're disconnected from this whole inner world, when we're disconnected from the body, when we're living from a place of, having an unregulated nervous system, it's really impossible to do any of the things that I mentioned, like being open or being authentic or having a career that you even like. You can't really sense into what's right for you. You can't even sense into your own needs properly. You can't really sense into your own energy levels properly. You're always going to be living in an exhausted state, or like overworking, fight, flight, freeze. Like there's always going to be some kind of problem that doesn't really need to exist. And it's basically due to this inability to attune to your nervous system, this sort of ignorance about the nervous system and the pure wisdom of the body. So when we learn to listen, we create the ability to reflect on our experience rather than just react to it. And instead of being always in survival mode, we actually learn to move out of survival mode and into deeper states of well-being. As long as we live, we're going to have our nervous system, right? And we're going to want to partner up with our nervous system in order to experience more well-being. And essentially, when we're not connected to ourselves in this way, we're just living from states of reactivity, survival mode, like I said. And when we begin to listen, again, to the nervous system, to the body, we start becoming aware, we can learn to just watch. We learn to just observe experience. We learn to not get so reactive towards experience, right? And when we do react, we notice that we're reacting and we can call ourselves out. Yep, I was being reactive. It's like we can start to notice our reactivity. We start to feel where it's coming from inside of us. We can feel the wounds. We can slowly start to heal them. We change our very relationship to those kinds of feelings by accepting them, right, and allowing them to come up. Right? And of course, we just feel a lot better. Because when you're always living in just reactivity mode, it's kind of like you're like an unconscious animal, essentially. Right? You're just like trying to get what you want now, and there's no sort of like idea of your development for the future. There's no space for that. You're too busy surviving, right? And in essence, a lot of us don't have to be living like that anymore. There's quite a lot of us that really just don't. So this sort of understanding of our feelings and thoughts and behaviors basically offers a way for us to be with our experience in ways that doesn't allow our inner world to overwhelm us and basically hijack us. Right? The key word there is hijack. Right? We can have an intense emotion that can feel overwhelming, but once you're able to really connect yourself, surrender to it, be aware of it, it's not really going to hijack you. You're not going to get reactive about it. Right? Because the key thing to notice is that you're always reacting to every thought that arises, every feeling that arises. It's like all this stuff is kind of just controlling you, kind of like a puppet on a string, and you're just kind of reacting to it. It's like this stuff arises, it kind of tortures you for a bit, and then it kind of passes away. Right, so when we're actually flooded by our emotions, basically what I mean by flooded here, I don't really like that word. I want to just say basically just when we're hijacked by our emotions, they of course overwhelm us and we just lose connection to ourselves. Instead, this conditioning arises that starts controlling us, right? And we lose our connection to regulation. We lose our connection to our ability to be in a regulated state. And see, the goal here isn't to like always just be in some regulated state. That's what someone might think, because dysregulations in the nervous system simply happen, right? The point is that you want to notice when you're not regulated and then find your way back to regulation. That's a good sign of a very, very healthy nervous system. It's not very realistic to always be in states of regulation, because the reality is that, yeah, you'll get scared or something can challenge you. You can feel like overwhelmed, right? There's just all this sort of human-related stuff that can happen. It's just that when you're kind of thrown off, you want to be able to get back, and you want to trust your ability to get back. Not in a way that avoids anything that you're feeling, but in a way that fosters deeper integration and connection to yourself. So getting back doesn't mean like getting back to like this particular state, this way of just feeling this way forever. It's more so about bringing yourself back to connection to yourself, regardless of the thought that's in your mind, regardless of the feeling that you're experiencing. Right? It's this pure connection to yourself that is regulating, and this is really what's incredibly valuable here. So when you're safely anchored within yourself, basically when you feel safe within yourself and you're able to regulate, we're also able to connect to our states and listen to the various stories that arise from various states. Because a lot of our stories in our mind, a lot of our beliefs are actually shaped up by our nervous system and the state of our nervous system. Right? And once we're actually safe within ourselves, once we're regulated, we have this inner psychological space that can begin to emerge, and now we can start to see ourselves more clearly rather than, of course, just reacting and being in survival mode. So this inner psychological space is completely needed for reflection. And when we learn to listen to our nervous system, we create the skills to turn towards our experience rather than avoiding it. And we can actually turn toward it with a sense of curiosity. As you, of course, develop this ability, right, what I'm talking about in this video, you will, as you get pretty skilled with it, you can meet experience with a sense of curiosity, with a sense of compassion, with a sense of having an open heart. You basically have an open heart towards your own pain. Right? And you basically have the ability to respond rather than simply react. So this whole ability to listen to your body, listen to your nervous system, is very linked with this idea of self-compassion. Because essentially, once you're actually connected to yourself and regulating, self-compassion is just this like emergent property that just starts to happen completely on its own. Whereas the opposite of self-compassion, we can say in this context, is self-criticism. Right? Basically, when we're in survival states, we automatically activate this self-criticism. And so when we move out of safety and connection and into a state of protection and survival, we lose the capacity for self-compassion. Right? I'll tell you a quick story about this Buddhist monk in this lab. So these scientists hook a few Buddhist monks up to an EEG machine to calculate their brain waves and all that kind of good stuff. And one of the scientists asks, "Do you ever move in meditation?" And the Buddhist monk says, "Only out of compassion for my knees." Right? And of course, to me it's obvious, but to a lot of people it may not be. So essentially, the Buddhist monk has watched himself close down to experience, close his heart to his own pain, avoid his own pain so much, to the point where he's seen this pattern of closing down and shutting down so much in his psyche, basically to the point where he can slowly start to remain open and open and open and have a sense of open heart to his own pain. He can actually have compassion for the feeling of pain in his knee. Right? A lot of people will think that's silly, right? Like when you stub your toe, you're probably like, "Oh, fuck my toe. It hurts, this sucks." Right? Maybe like when you're sick and your nose is plugged, you're like, "Ah, man, I hate my nose." Right? Whereas like a very counterintuitive way of relating to it is actually having compassion for your nose when it's plugged, or your toe when you stub it. Right? So this is like a skill that he had to develop over time. I remember I read that before I went on my first meditation retreat quite a few years ago. And then after my retreat, I was like, "Oh yeah, like I get it now." It's like, of course. It's like, this is so, it's just like, I read it and I was like, I have to develop this inside of me. Like it's so obvious. Like I have to be able to do that. And then after that retreat, it became far more natural, right? Because a lot of stuff inside of me was processed. I could remain more open, and this ability to just connect to myself deepened. And then, the skills started to develop a lot more. So moving on, with the ability to recognize a moment of distress and notice your sort of survival state, we move into a moment of awareness instead of simply being swept deeper into dysregulation. Basically, when you're actually recognizing that you're in a survival state, your body's all like tense and like, right, your mind's kind of like all over the place and you're worried, right? You feel contracted in your body, right? The second you start bringing awareness to this stuff, right, this is really how you start to begin moving back into regulation rather than being pushed deeper into dysregulation. Let's talk a little bit, only a tiny bit, about how to move into more regulation. So there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do. You can do yoga, eat healthy foods, exercise. Your overall health and well-being matters a lot. Connecting to healthy people. You want to make sure that the work you're doing is something that you really actually care about and feel connected to. You want your work to be an extension of your soul, not just something that you do for fucking money. And a very important point here is meditation. Talk about it in every single one of my videos. You have to develop a formal meditation practice so that you can develop this ability to simply witness yourself. Because without meditation, you don't have this skill whatsoever. It's something that you need to cultivate over time. In the same way how weightlifting is like a skill that needs to get cultivated over time. If you don't bench press, you're not going to be able to lift 200 pounds on the bench press without developing to that point. Same thing with your ability to just watch yourself mindfully, to observe yourself, to connect to yourself. Right? Meditation is on a whole other level here, because without awareness, what's happening is your subconscious programming is just running on autopilot. It's controlling you in a completely mechanical and unconscious and robotic way. Awareness is like we're bringing just clarity. I meant to say meditation is like we're bringing just awareness and clarity to what is happening, and we're starting to just see it for what it is, which then allows us to change. And essentially, just the act of being aware begins to heal what's going on inside of us. Awareness alone is curative. Awareness alone is like this auto-correcting system. Right? So another good point is to actually study your own mind. Take some personality tests, study psychology, go on my book list, buy a few books on psychology, and I have a therapy and healing section. Just buy some books on psychology and read them. Learn about how the human mind works so you can apply these ideas to your life in a very practical way and actually begin to make the changes that you really want to make. So I'm currently reading this book. It's called Anchored by Deb Donna. It's all about the nervous system and all that kind of cool stuff. That's a pretty decent place to start out if you want to go a bit deeper into the stuff. Other than that, I am offering one-to-one coaching. You can apply to work with me. Link is in the pinned comment. That's all I got for this video. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Take it easy.